It's 1994 on a fairly typical late summer's evening in the Raploch. Tired workers make their way home after their shift. Some kids are called in for the night by their parents. A couple of people are taking their dogs for one last walk before bedtime. Inside the flats, folk are settling down, watching TV with a cup of tea. A 20-year-old woman has just returned from her boyfriend's and is catching up with her parents. Outside their home, a figure checks to make sure no one is watching, then climbs on top of a bin. The silhouette crouches briefly, scans for witnesses once more, then peers through an open window before reaching inside. Moments later, the intruder flees as flames begin to engulf the flat with the family inside, unaware of the growing blaze. I'm Myles Bonnar, and this is Crime Next Door, the Ballad of Big Mags. Episode 3, A Family from Hell. Big Mags, once the voice of the Raploch, has been kicked off the estate. As the council scramble to house her and the rest of the Haney family, speculation is rife. Why was the great community leader so forcefully hounded out? Journalist Ed Johnson.
There's a phrase called tall poppy syndrome. This idea that if you grow too tall, someone's going to knock you down to size. If you put your head above the parapet, people are going to knock you down. I think Mags became a victim of that tall poppy syndrome. I think increasingly, as she was clearly relishing the limelight as being the saviour of those communities. And I think that was at the root of how the community in Raploch ultimately turned against her. She got too big for her boots and she'd overstepped the mark in portraying herself as something that she wasn't.
Mags wasn't pretending to be concerned about paedophiles. Nobody on the estate questioned that, but Mags and her family cast a long shadow over the place. In a strange way, it's almost hinted at during presenter Kilroy's shout-out at the end of the show she was on.
Well, there might have been a bit of a war here, but are you at war with your neighbours? Are your neighbours making your life a misery with noise, disruption, whatever? Have you even come to blows? Call us now.
Mags was sitting listening to this promo for a forthcoming episode. It would be called Nasty Neighbours, plugging right into another hot topic of debate at the time, one that was, once again, taking up column inches and minutes of news reports. The dreaded Families from Hell.
We needed families from hell so that our own lives seemed a little less hellish.
This is the journalist Joan Burney, who appeared on Kilroy alongside Mags.
And the families who made hell for other people could be used as a vehicle for getting out a lot of worry and concern about the way society was going. And we've always had scapegoats. We still have scapegoats. But at that time, there was a sort of moral almost panic about families from hell.
If Mags had applied to appear on that show, she would no doubt have been, once again, front and centre. In the years running up to Mags's fame, the Haney name had already appeared in court reporting. And we aren't talking about a handful of times either. This is Tim Bugler, a freelance reporter who's covered the Stirling area for nearly 35 years.
But court reporting has been my main thing over the years, which is more or less where I first came across Mags, of course.
From your experience at the court in Stirling, just how often were the Haneys up there and being accused of various crimes?
In 1995, I was obviously aware that the Haney family were very regular appearers in Stirling Sheriff Court, which was at that time, along with the High Court in Stirling. I mean, the Haneys' solicitor for many, many years was a guy called Ian Angus. And I once asked Ian how many times he'd appeared for the Haneys, and he just couldn't tell me. He's just said hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
I recall that there were at least a couple of individual Haneys who were referred to as a one-man crime wave.
This is Mark McGivern, chief reporter at the Daily Record. Then he was just a reporter.
So in that one clan, there were lots of different one-man or one-woman crime waves. If you looked at their rap sheet, you would see that they would be shoplifting, drugs, some violent offences, thefts, burglaries. Some of them could have scores of crimes against their name and their criminal record. So the Haneys were a whole catalogue, a whole legion of one-man and one-woman crime waves. So the amount of crimes committed in Stirling by that family was kind of stuff of legend. So they weren't great to have around.
So I'm going through newspaper archives from the 90s, trying to get a handle on the Haney family tree. And at this stage, Mags has 8 surviving kids. 7 have been in jail or in custody. And then you factor in grandkids. There's over 40, according to reports here. Nieces, nephews, in-laws, the list goes on. So it's not just a few people we're talking about here. As Mark McGivern says, it's more like a legion, with Mags at the very top. And she's got her own convictions: assault, breach of the peace, contempt of court and fraud. Her family, the Haney family, are no strangers to local law enforcement. One case in May 1995, on the face of it quite minor, would launch the Haneys from local court reporting to national notoriety.
And I was there one day, and Jojo Haney, one of Mags's youngest, probably he was the youngest, he was then 20, was appearing for being found in circumstances where it could be reasonably inferred he was going to commit theft. He was on the roof of the Golden Lion Hotel, and for this he got 60 days.
The sheriff that day was called Norrie Steen. The scale of the Haney family's offending took his breath away, and he made it known during his sentencing remarks, voiced up here by an actor.
What troubles me is the misery that this particular family has inflicted on the Raploch community over many, many years. If I were the presiding sheriff here, I'd be taking very severe steps to make sure that this particular family are deterred from any further offending.
I was a reporter from the Stirling Observer there at the same time, and we looked at each other and thought, well, Mags was sitting in the back of the court. And at a particular time, there was a story running nationally about a family from Glenrothes called the Grahams, and they'd been called Scotland's family from hell. And we went out and we spoke to Mags in the corridor, and I said to her, it sounds like the sheriff is sort of casting you in the same mould as the Grahams from Glenrothes, as a family from hell. And Mags saw this ball coming out of the scrum and picked it up and ran with it and said, yes, he's branded us Scotland's second family from hell. Which is interesting, actually, because when you see a reporting of this continuing Haney saga over the years, people tend to shorthand it by saying that Sheriff Steen called them a family from hell. It wasn't actually him. Mag said, he's branded us the family from hell. And then she said, I don't know what he's complaining about. It's my family that keeps him in a job.
Mags reportedly went on to say that her kids had been brought up in the jungle and had to fight for survival. Then added that the sheriff, and I quote, thinks he can come in here and clean the place up, but he's got another thing coming.
So that was the start of it all. The story widely used in the papers the following day. And I got a call from one of the papers saying, Leon, listen, we don't want this Mags Haney story to go away. We don't want Mags to go away. Anything you can get into, we're interested.
And with that, the Haneys were on the radar of the newspapers as a family from hell, with Mags as a larger-than-life matriarch. It was simply irresistible. Strange thing is, even though she claimed her family were being demonised in the press, she always seemed to have time for journalists. Ed Johnson again.
Yeah, I think she sort of took me under her wing a little bit, wondering what this, middle-class Englishman was doing, covering crime in central Scotland. Would always say hello to me as I was at the court, even if I was covering cases that involved her own children. At a certain point, I even found myself sitting at a kitchen table drinking a cup of tea with her at her flat in the Raploch.
Ah, a wee cup of tea. Lovely. For Tim, Mags's friendliness was expressed in a different way.
There's at one stage, and I can't remember why, and I certainly won't say who, one of the male members of the Haney clan had grabbed me by the collar and pushed me up against a stone pillar outside the front of the court. And Mags just growled at him, "Put him down." And he put me down, and off I went on the rest of my duties. But I can't remember what prompted it. Something I'd written or something I was about to write, who knows.
Whatever triggered it, Tim didn't let it change his view of Mags.
She was an extraordinary character, a very forceful character. But she had an odd side to her because she was obviously hugely destructive, and Sheriff Steen was right. You know, she and her family did inflict misery on that community for many years, but she was also, in a perverse way, very community-minded, and it did, I think, genuinely concern her that there were people abusing children in the area, and it genuinely concerned her that vandalism was going on. And she famously once took her own granddaughter over to the police station to report her for setting fire to her neighbour's house.
That neighbour was Caroline Dunbar. She and her family lived right below the Haneys. It's worth noting at this point, a lot of people didn't want to speak to us during the making of this podcast. Some felt these stories are best left in the past, that there's no point opening up old wounds. Some said it was just too difficult to discuss. Others, well, let's just say there's still some fear there. Concern opening your mouth about the Haneys might lead to retribution, even decades later. Despite this cocktail of emotions, Caroline, the Haneys' neighbour, agreed to speak. She and her family spent over a year living beneath the Haneys, complaining to the council on multiple occasions.
It was just unreal. My mum she couldn't sleep at night with them banging down or banging the windows. See, at that course, you didn't have security doors at that time. You used to break them. They didn't even have the back security doors. They used to break them. And then everybody used to go up and down it every night. Every night, 7 days a week.
And it went way beyond the usual noisy neighbour nuisance stuff.
They actually went into my room and stole my television. The window was open a bit. I was doing the living room with my mum and my dad and my brother and a couple of my pals were in. And they jumped in the window and stole my television. Then my dad got me for my birthday.
One word kept coming up during our interview with Caroline. Threat.
What they used to do to me is they used to threaten my man.
She talked about threats against her boyfriend of physical violence.
I said, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'll threaten you, I'll stab you.
There were malicious warnings.
They threatened to ruin my wedding. Threatened to egg me when I was going out and everything. And egg the wedding cars and everything.
And threats against her parents.
It was even threatening my mum. At the end of it, my mum couldn't stay in the house herself.
Caroline said they lived in constant fear. And then came the fire.
The situation with Kim Haney when setting her house on fire, what she did, she was that small and she got the wheelie bin, jumped on the wheelie bin and set the curtains alight.
Who did that?
Kim Haney. So that was my granddaughter. She set the house on fire. We were working to get out that night.
Set the house on fire?
Set on the house on fire.
And how do you know it was them?
My mum kept the window in the bedroom open for the cat, because the cat was a wanderer. I was just in with my boyfriends at that time. And my dad says to me, do you smell burning? I says, aye. And that's what my dad left the cooker on. My dad went to the room and it was on fire. We had to rush and get everybody out the house at night.
The fire destroyed one room and coated the rest of the flat in soot.
We lost a whole room for our stuff. They put me and my brother in a bed and breakfast in Glasgow Road in Bannockburn because I just couldn't go back. I was so scared to go back.
As Tim Bugler mentioned, it was Mags herself that turned her granddaughter Kim into the police. She was given a deferred sentence after admitting to willful fire-raising. Kim's motivation is unclear, but that would be the last time Caroline and her family would set foot in that house. I'm finding it hard to get a handle on Mags's character here. She's the head of a family turned crime wave, yet she delivered one of her own into the hands of the police. But in most people's eyes, the Haneys are led by Big Mags. Big Mags, the head of the family from hell. Big Mags, Scotland's anti-paedophile campaigner. Big Mags, spokesperson of the Raploch.
The mention of the Raploch area in Stirling and Mags Haney, she was synonymous with it, absolutely synonymous with it. And I recall conversations I had with people who lived there and regarded it as a good community that had been spoiled by Mags Haney. And I got that because nobody knew anything else about the Raploch apart from Mags Haney.
Remember tall poppy syndrome? Well, this is the point that kicks in. Here we have a family, a source of a lot of the crime in the area, led by someone positioning themselves in the media almost as a moral crusader. And locals who know them best aren't happy. In addition to writing letters of complaint to the papers, a petition springs up, demanding that the council remove them from the estate. It attracts hundreds of signatures. Cassie Donald, Mags's granddaughter again.
There was people who were active in wanting them removed. And, you know, they all had their reasons. That's fine. But it wasn't just her, it was the family as a whole. She was a figurehead, so then it became, we want Big Mags out. But it was the family as a whole, it wasn't one person.
"25th of August, 1997. A crowd starts to gather outside Mags's flat. It's little over 6 months since convicted paedophile Alan Christie was driven from the estate. Caroline again.
I came down to Mum's home 12 o'clock that day, and I said to Mum, "There's something happening." She went, "What?" I said, "There's something happening at the Haneys." She went, "No, you must be telling lies." And I said, "No, Mum, the Haneys are getting evicted today."
The news quickly made its way to local journalist Ed Johnson.
You know, I think we must have been tipped off to the fact that something was afoot through our regular calls to the police and got round there pretty quickly.
When Ed arrived at Huntley Crescent, home of Big Mags, he was confronted by a growing mob chanting for the Haneys to get out of the Raploch. The petition had been ignored, or at the very least, wasn't moving fast enough for residents.
I mean, it was a big crowd. There was anger, there was a certain carnival atmosphere as well. It was something that was breaking the normal routine of life on the estate. I think people were enjoying the sense of occasion.
I was standing at a corner. The petition went round about 2 weeks before that. There were quite a few kids, there were parents, there were folk that was used to stay near the Haneys.
This mob would grow 400 strong, much bigger than the one whipped up to remove Christie.
I speak to a lot of the community members now whose parents were involved in that protest and doing that.
Cassie Donald again.
And I think it got out of hand, I think, and they all kind of got involved. I think people assumed that the crowd was everybody wanting her out. It's a nosy community, so a lot of people that were standing there were out to see what was going on, and there was a lot of people who did want them out because they deemed them a threat to their community. But that wasn't necessarily her, that was the whole family. They felt like the issue would be solved if everybody went.
The crowd chanted, "Build a bonfire and put the Haneys on the top." Journalist Ed plucked up the courage to see what Mags thought of this mob that had turned against her.
I walked across the street, walked into her tenement block, climbed up the 2 flights of stairs, and I'm ashamed to say, hesitated outside the door where there was quite a lot of shouting taking place. And whilst I got on very well with Mags and was pretty confident that she would give me her ear and give me a quote, I didn't know who was going to be opening the door that day, and I thought it was probably better in terms of self-preservation to not knock on the door and to walk back down the stairs with my tail between my legs.
Ed rejoined the crowd, which seemed happy to stay there on what was an uncharacteristically warm and sunny August afternoon. As the chants got louder, it was clear push would eventually come to shove. Then, police vans screeched into Huntley Crescent and outpoured the boys in blue.
There must have been some coordinated response between the authorities and the Haney family in the somewhat choreographed way. She was taken away under police escort, clearly to accommodation that had been organised for her.
Mags would never return to the estate, at least not to live. Her reign within the Raploch was over. But she wasn't about to leave without playing to the crowd.
And she came out at about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon and she started giving everybody the fingers. She came out with a pink pair of pink leggings, a pink t-shirt and pink swappers, and she gave them all the fingers.
I think Mags, as unpleasant as it probably was for her, left with her own head held high. She sort of twirled like a ballerina and kind of curtsied to the crowd. She knew there was a moment in history there, the history of the Raploch estate, if just that, and she was enjoying the notoriety of it as well, I think.
The next day, Mags was front page news again. The papers carried a big photo of her, backlit by the sun, giving the V's to the crowd as she goes.
Residents of Huntly Crescent woke up this morning to the realisation that the Haney family had finally gone. All that remained was a line of washing outside the boarded-up house, bearing witness to the family's hurried exit. People on the Raploch said it ended years of persecution from the extended Haney family, who occupied 6 flats on the estate. Raploch residents are talking about having a street party tonight, apparently unconcerned that by hounding out the Haney family, they've simply moved their problem elsewhere.
As residents celebrated, Mags and her family were left to lick their wounds in limbo. You'd think being driven out of your house by an angry mob would be about as bad as it gets. But, thanks to her notoriety, for Mags, worse was yet to come. She and her so-called family from hell were about to become a problem for more than just the Raploch estate.
The council knows what like they are, so why put them up beside decent people? She's no coming to Bannockburn. She's definitely no coming to Bannockburn. In a hut in a field. And then that's where they should go.
That's next time on the Ballad of Big Mags.